I'm introducing Laurence Parks, an incredibly easy person to introduce. You may know that Laurence is a double Cannes Lion winner and incredibly eclectic brands. First winning for Marmite and then for Audi. So there's a story and a half. He's worked with some of the most iconic brands in the world, Netflix, Intel, Philips, just to name a few. He's here as Chief Strategy Officer at Rufus Leonard, ranked by one of my favourite publications, The Drum, as the #1 elite agency for design. So clearly we've all going to be enjoying understanding their competencies there. But today, Laurence is going to be sharing with us a unique framework to help us differentiate our brands and drive preference, loyalty, and advocacy. And who doesn't love a great framework? So over to you, Laurence.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the day. Hope it's as useful for you as we're finding it. I think one of the biggest challenges that there is in any job is working out where best to spend your time and money. I think in marketing that challenge is becoming increasingly difficult as the options increase. So media fragmentation, meaning we have many more channels that we had to think about historically, but also marketing's role, increasing role across the entire customer experience, I think means that there are many more places where you might have to think, right, where should I spend my money? How do I most effectively spend the money to make the most difference to the brand and to the organisation? I'm going to take you through a framework that we've honed over 30 years of us doing this stuff for our clients. But before I go into the framework itself and take you through how we manage that, I just wanted to show you a quick video to introduce Rufus Leonard, because I'm sure a lot of you haven't heard of us. I call us the best agency no one's ever heard of, which is a shame because I'm in charge of sales and marketing, so that really... it's actually a bit, it's an eye-opening thing, because so obviously I've worked in marketing now for, over 20 years. And when I became head of sales and marketing at Rufus, it was really interesting it was the first time that I was in charge of a budget to go, okay, how do we spend this? And I was thinking, it's easy. I've been doing this for ages with other clients, but it's very different when it's your money versus someone else's money. And it was a real eye-opener for me, but it was also knowing how to separate the signal from the noise. I was thinking, well, we'll test this stuff, and if it works, then we'll double down on it. And what I didn't realise until starting to do it, that the biggest challenge is the lag effect. So you do something, and you don't know that it's worked for a month, for 6 months, for a year, and it's then a case of kind of sticking to your guns a lot of the time and convincing other people that it might still be working, we just don't know. Anyway, it kind of relates to this. So let me show you a video about Rufus. So I'm aware, due to the size of the screen, some of the writing there was illegible, so sorry for those of you at the back. The key thing to say in there is we call ourselves brand experience engineers. And by that, kind of, we mean sort of brand experience is how a brand delivers its promise through every touch point. Increasingly digital, but kind of through everything. And why we call ourselves engineers is because we think that in this increasingly complex world, you need an engineering mindset to be able to deliver meaningful, connected and consistent brand experiences across all of those channels. And by engineering mindset, we mean the ability to think big picture, think about what the brand promise is and be clear about that in your mind, but then care about the detail, how that is delivered in every single micro interaction, because it's the collection of those micro interactions that customers have with you that deliver ultimately the brand promise. And you saw at the end there, it mentioned the BXI, which is our brand experience index, which is the methodology or the framework that I'm going to take you through today. So first up, this is an indication from Gartner a year ago about the number of companies that were identifying that customer experience, or experience generally, was the way that they were going to compete versus their competition in the next 2 years. So vast majority of them. So there's an increasing awareness, increasing realization that the actual experience that your customers have of the brand is how you differentiate yourself, how you can acquire new customers, and how you can drive retention and loyalty going forward. But we think there's a nuance around customer experience, which I'll take you through now. So when people talk about customer experience, we feel they're often talking about kind of the hygiene factors. So making sure that you're getting rid of pain points, and often it is about kind of identifying where you're failing to meet expectations along your journey, and making sure that kind of you are getting rid of those pain points and at least delivering an experience that's as good as your competitors. So matching expectations for customers, which we think is very different to thinking about brand experience. So brand experience is identifying where along the journey you might want to invest additional money and additional time to create something that is distinctive, something that is differentiating, something that is memorable. It's those moments along the journey where you create something that people will remember and give themselves as an explicit reason to come back to you next time, and even advocate you to other people. So we talk about CX being across the entire journey, and BX being those moments along the journey where you create something differentiating. Now, the framework, BXI, is a way of identifying where along the journey you should invest to create those differentiating moments. Because you don't want to invest along the entire journey and have every moment differentiating, because actually that would be a waste of money. And actually some moments in the journey, customers just want to crack on and have a seamless experience and not think about it, just move on. So why should you care about brand experience? Why should you care about those moments of differentiation on the journey? Well, based upon our data, and we've done the brand experience index when we have actually done the quantification piece of it. We've done it with 30 different brands across 40,000 customers, so relatively large database. When we look at those top performers of brand experience, so those delivering extraordinary brand experience, as we call it, compared to the lowest performers, the top performers have almost 80% higher future purchase intent. So it clearly drives, or certainly there's a correlation between high BXI and repeat usage. It's also a high correlation between high BXI, those people giving extraordinary brand experience, and advocacy. So we had included the NPS question in our methodology, and the difference between the highest scorers and the lowest scorers was 45 NPS points, which obviously for anyone who knows NPS is quite a massive distinction. And lastly, when we've done case studies, when we've worked with clients like Reckitt Benckiser, which I'll go through a case study in a moment, we've shown that actually by driving brand experience, it can be it's more effective than above the line. So in the case of Nurofen, having brand experience kind of was 91% of describing all future purchase intent in comparison to above the line, which was only 9%. So good reasons for engaging with brand experience. So now I'm going to take you through how our framework can help you ensure that you deliver extraordinary brand experience. By the way, there is on everyone's table or chair a report, our most recent report. This is the second of our reports, which goes through a number of categories where we have done the research to show insights in, I think it's supermarkets, in retail, in financial services, and others. But let me talk you through the framework. So the whole point of this was to help brands identify the most efficient way to drive revenue through acquisition and retention and differentiation along the customer journey. Obviously, part of the reason we created this was because when we decided to hang our hat on brand experience, we said, well, if we're going to engineer this thing called brand experience, we're going to have to be able to measure it, right? And no one at the time had actually successfully created a way of measuring brand experience, partly because it's such a nebulous thing. If you think about how the brand delivers its promise across all touch points, it's very hard to identify that. So as well as our kind of 30 years of experience in this, we also found an academic piece of research from Columbia University, which had attempted to measure brand experience and use that as a kind of as an input. But we identified that there are 5 facets to brand experience, like separating the entire experience into these 5 areas. So feel and do are your classic emotional and functional benefits, those that kind of anyone involved in advertising will be familiar with. But then connect, it'll think at the bottom is around kind of setting expectations. So being really clear in your communications about what people can expect when they engage with you, and then being consistent when you deliver that experience to them. On Connect, this is around sort of, does the brand bring you together with other people of like-minded? So in a really light touch, is it a value? Do you share the same values as the brand? So kind of vicariously, you're engaging with people of a like mind. But more explicitly, does it help you engage with people of the same interests? So think Harley-Davidson, creating a Harley-Davidson group, kind of bringing people together in that way. Obviously, increasingly, technology is allowing brands to do that more and more. And then lastly, sense on the left here. This is around, does the brand kind of stimulate your senses? Now, obviously, different markets, these facets have different importance. So retail, for example, sense is really, really important. So what we do when we measure a brand, we measure their competitors as well and compare them against their competitors. So it's not about the absolute score, it's about the relative score. So you can get a sense of immediately which of these facets the brand already has some sort of differentiation versus the category as a whole that we might want to double down on. Now, I mentioned earlier that this is a framework because in some circumstances, we don't have the opportunity to measure the brands. The brands don't have the money for it, they don't want to do it, they don't want another metric, because obviously often we have metric coming out of our ears. But as a framework, we find this to be very, very useful. So we just recently gone through a brand refresh for Halifax, which we've used this to identify how the brand delivers its brand positioning across all of the experience. Again, very useful framework to use. Once we've identified how the brand is doing against those facets, we can then identify, again, apologies for the size, and I'll just point them out, identifying key moments along the journey. So there are those moments where you're missing expectations, what we call the 0 moment, and this is really the customer experience bit. So identifying those moments where you're missing kind of expectations. I should say, when we do the research, we ask people to give verbatims of what has driven their high or low score across various things. So we have the kind of the qualitative things to go, okay, you're missing in this part of the journey and this is the reason why. So in those cases, it's about kind of taking rid of the pain points. But then we can also identify moments where the brand has already created something that is memorable and distinctive for people that we might want to either double down on, make sure that we don't lose, and possibly advertise if they're not already advertising it. And then the potential hero moments are those moments where the brand, as a result of their promise, really should be creating something that's differentiating, but they're currently missing the mark. And I'll bring this to life with a case study, actually each of these with a case study in just a moment. So, the case study. Premier Inn, one of our long-standing clients, obviously a brand that's been doing very well over the last kind of 15 years. Before we got involved with them, they were already doing well, admittedly. They already had a brand promise that they'd been communicated for a number of times, which was a great night's sleep guaranteed. We got involved when they were looking to refresh a large part of their estate, and they came to us as a sort of brand strategy and brand design agency to go, okay, we need some help to make sure that our brand visual identity is refreshed across the entire estate through the experience. But as tends to happen with us, we kind of ask difficult questions, which meant that kind of the program or the project moved from a visual identity thing, a livery kind of thing into a brand experience question. And working with them, we identified that there were moments along the journey where they could reduce their costs as they were refreshing the entire estate. Things like, for example, wardrobes. So people don't need to hide their clothes, they just need to hang them. So putting up cheaper clothes bars rather than the wardrobes. But also bar soaps, so rather than having, as in this hotel still does, a fresh bar soaps in every bathroom seems a bit wasteful. Actually having liquid soap, people don't really care about that, bring their own toiletries, etc. But spending that money that was saved in those areas on areas that would double down on the brand promise. So they had this great night sleep guaranteed. It was a meaningful promise. They did actually guarantee it. But actually what we identified as we were thinking about the entire journey was the moment of truth for that promise, the bed experience. Premier Inn gave exactly the same experience as every other budget hotel. It was a budget hotel, bed, mattress and pillow. So identifying that actually if they were going to invest anywhere where they save money, they should invest in making that bit of the experience differentiating and memorable so that people would talk about it. And I guess the point here about the BXI scores, you can see this again is against the category. So they're all doing pretty well across a lot of the facets, but the one that they were doing best on was sense. And there are various reasons for that. The fact that they were known for the purple thing, the fact that they've been talking about a good night's sleep guarantee for such a long time. But it was about pushing that differentiation further. So what we understood was there are a number of moments. So an existing hero moment was around breakfast. So as I said, when we had the verbatims from people saying kind of what was good and what was bad, the breakfasts were commonly regarded as an excellent element of the Premier Inn experience. So plentiful and good. And so as part of this, it's like, well, actually people think that's great. So actually double down on that. Why don't you give kids breakfast for free? Kids don't eat that much. They don't actually have that many kids in the hotel because it's often it's business guests, etc. So it was of limited cost, but actually showed that they knew that this was an important bit and pushed it even further. And then the potential hero moments, as I said, when you think about what their promise was and you look at the journey, there was a moment where they really should have had a hero moment at the bed experience, but they didn't. So all the monies that were saved went towards kind of creating, putting two types of pillows for people, so a hard and soft pillow. So that was a kind of a moment where kind of there's an insight. People have tastes in their pillows, and we'll give them the option. But also they bought 30,000 Hypnos mattresses. So these are British-made mattresses that the Marriott Hotel I think use, but they are kind of a premium mattress experience. And then our role was to, in addition to kind of being part of that team to get there, was to then merchandise that thing. So you can see here on the right, I'll show you a bit more, pillow sash to tell people that they've got a choice of pillows and talk about that, but also other things. So for example, you see the Hypnos bed there, bottom right, the facilities folder became your guide to a good night's sleep, so a content-driven piece with advice if you're suffering from insomnia, and the ability to talk about kind of the various ways in which Premier Inn have created an environment that makes a great night's sleep. And for example, putting in quiet times at particular times, trying to encourage those stag weekends to quieten down because there might be kids in the building. So all of that kind of obviously not just doing it, but also then raising awareness of it to make that moment a hero moment that people would consciously, explicitly know and then talk to their friends about. So obviously you've got to show results, and as I said, Premier Inn were doing already very well, but as a result of this refresh, we saw kind of the success accelerate. And one of the key areas for us, of course, was in the guest reviews. So in social and in guest reviews, we were getting then obviously increased scores, but also a lot of people talking about the choice of pillows and the mattresses as being something that was distinctive from what they get, what they expected from a budget hotel experience. So that's a case study to bring that to life quite nicely. I wanted to show you a second case study because this then, I guess, goes a bit deeper into the use of data. And as I said, kind of we find the framework of those facets to be a useful tool when thinking through the brand experience that the brand delivers. But when we do get to create the data, you can see with this Nurofen case study for Reckitt Benckiser, we can create much stronger business cases for our clients to invest in those areas. So So very different to Premier Inn. In this case, Nurofen, for various reasons, isn't very differentiated in the market currently, and they're seeing this in sales. It doesn't help when various people say you shouldn't use Nurofen. There's no different. It's no different to the generic. Just by boot's own, ibuprofen is ibuprofen, and so you can see kind of there was no sense, and they weren't justifying their price premium, which is at something like 20%. And as a result of kind of creating the data, we then looked at the entire journey to identify what parts of the journey were driving future purchase intent. You won't be able to see this, but on the far left here, this is the thing I was indicating earlier. The above the line ads, according to our data, so we had sort of, I think it was 1,000 customers and another 1,000 non-customers. We were asking them kind of their future purchase intent and what they had experienced along the journey. And we identified using structural pathway modelling that could identify the relationship between kind of future purchase intent and what people had experienced. That the above the line advertising, which by the way they were spending 95% of their marketing budget. This is an FMCG company, Reckitt Benckiser. That's not unusual. Was only 9% of the reason for people's future purchase intent, whereas the pharmacist, if you go and ask a pharmacist which painkiller should I use for this particular problem, obviously has a massive impact on future purchase intent. Digital marketing was 14%, and the product experience, I mean, I'm surprised that it's as low as this at 30% of future purchase intent. When I take it, does it work for me? Has unsurprisingly the biggest impact on future purchase intent. But as a result of this, kind of just on the basic level, it's like, okay, we're spending almost all of our budget in above the line. Maybe we should think about healthcare professional marketing to the pharmacists. Maybe we should think about more digital marketing and seeing what we can do to further enhance the product experience. So just at that level of kind of getting them to think differently about how they use their budget was important. But then kind of off the back of that, where the digital marketing piece, when coupled with an understanding that at the moment they weren't justifying their price premium, people didn't have a difference in relationship with Nurofen that they should to give them a reason to buy Nurofen over the generic product. We went into a digital strategy piece with them to identify what role they should have online to help people not just get rid of their pain, but manage their pain. So we knew that kind of as well as mums with kids who are trying to manage their young child's, parents with kids, their young child's pain, but also with the older audience that are trying to manage long-term joint pain. There are various things that the brand could be doing online to help people manage their pain, and this kind of indicates this, but I'm going to bring it to line with a terrible named persona here, Chronic Pain Carl. But this shows kind of the journey through the ecosystem of the bits that were relevant to him. And this really was all about the fact that as a result of the qual research that we did off the back of our original quant, there's a massive group of individuals here who are looking for help to manage their long-term pain, physical pain, but at the moment there aren't that many sources of help for them online. So firstly, they often feel that they are kind of experiencing it alone, and secondly, looking for ways to manage their pain by using fewer chemicals than they would otherwise. So there's a general sort of desire for people to not, I mean, even though ibuprofen is not addictive, to try and reduce the amount of chemicals they use and find other ways, whether it's yoga or whatever, mindfulness, etc., to manage it. So as well as doing the strategy, we then created, and this is something we do frequently for our digital clients, a simple, well-designed prototype so that it can be shared internally and people can click through it, like the board members, and this is exactly what happened, could click through this experience as though it was a real experience and get excited about the experience that they were seeing. So what we created was this idea that as what people are currently doing, which is searching how do I manage my back pain, or kind of back pain advice or whatever, and sending them through to this is just a website, but simply kind of created where people can identify where their pain is, how long it's lasted, how they would describe it, to then be sent through to content that either syndicated, so from the likes of from a mindfulness expert or whatever, but also advice from experts there, doctors, etc., but peers who have also come to the site to go, I have this pain, I frequently have this pain, this is what I find to be useful in managing it. As you can see on the left-hand side, what is working for you. So inputting kind of when people come and get the value, kind of adding into the community to make people feel, A, that they're not alone in managing this pain, B, getting advice on how to manage it, but ultimately kind of there's the halo impact on for Nurofen of being an expert in this and helping people out. And ultimately, obviously, you can see, you can't really see on this, a suggestion of which Nurofen products might be good for you if you've got this particular back pain. But in the context of this, it doesn't feel like selling, and it actually feels like you're adding value to the relationship rather than just selling them something. And we also knew from the qual research that we did that often people experiencing this long-term pain, when they do eventually go to their GP, and by the way, throughout the entirety of the experience, this is if you're continuing to experience this, you really ought to go and see your GP for various regulatory reasons. But when you go to a GP, they often go, can you do a pain diary so we can know what's bringing on the pain? And so having that as a simple thing to as part of the experience, so that when they go to the GP, they've already got that data, was part of it. Now, so this is all very nice, and we got people at RB very excited about creating an online experience that could create a more emotional relationship with Nurofen and justify the price premium and give people a sense that Nurofen were an expert in managing pain, that would give people a reason to choose it over Bootzone, for example. But as a result of the data that we had, we could also give them a strong business case. So here you can see, you won't be able to see, actually, I'll have to describe it. There's a really lovely big screen down here, I can see it perfectly. The methodology that we have, when we ask people to score the brand, to give us the brand score across those 5 facets, we ask a bank of 20 questions. So there are 20 statements, I guess, and ask them to score 1 to 7 on whether they agree with it. So there are 4 statements for each of the 5 facets. And here you can see 4 statements. So there's a think one, there's 2 feel, and there's a do. These were the statements that were most, based upon our structural pathway modelling, the most impactful for driving future purchase intent for Nurofen based on the data we had. So I understand why Nurofen exists, and its purpose was the think facet. Feel was, I feel better after experiencing Nurofen, and the second one was, the experience that I have of Nurofen make me feel positive. The point is, we have on the left-hand side, next to those, the boxes, the current scores for the brand. And we could play, we created this kind of business case modelling tool where you could play with the scores that the brand gets on those statements. And so we put in for the 2 feel scores, the best in class, so Panadol, which is actually better, those are the Panadol scores for those statements. So we know it's possible for a brand, it's not pie in the sky, but it's kind of like, if we were best in class, what would we score? And we know as a result of the analytics what impact, if we increase those scores, would have on future purchase intent, and therefore, based upon the data we got from RB, what the future market share might be. So we can indicate, if we created this experience, which would give us best-in-class scores on those statements, we identified that it would give them 0.7% more market share, which across 3 years, across the world, was worth 66 million. So we then kind of, obviously this is built on assumptions, but they're meaningful assumptions and credible to be able to go to someone internally and go, right, if we did this experience, we would expect to deliver this kind of revenue. And you start kind of having useful conversations with people about investment at that point. Nice quote from Stephanie, who's the Global Director of Design, UX and Brand Experience at Reckitt. So when we started working with her, brand experience wasn't in her title. It now is. So her say, I mean, obviously, the reason why this worked so well is Reckitt Benckiser being FMCG, massively data-driven. When we got involved in them, Stephanie was going, we've got an econometric modelling, MMX, which basically helps us perfect kind of where we invest our monies from an ad point of view. I need something for the experience bit that can compete with that, because we're basically perfecting something, but it's one small area. We've got this 91% of other stuff. And so having this kind of obviously has made a case for thinking about experience rather than just advertising with RB. And obviously, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have something to sell. But what we find as an excellent starting point for anyone who might be interested in this is actually having a couple of hours workshop with us, so we can go in detail about the methodology, but actually start using that framework kind of without the research to go, okay, let's think about your brand and how it is in comparison to your competitors in these 5 areas. Where do you think you might invest time to double down on that stuff? And you get your hypotheses to then go into the research to see it for real and start having the data that you can make a business case for. And that's me. Hopefully that was within half an hour. Yeah, pretty good.